Royal Caribbean's released finally details about Perfect Day Mexico, its new beach clubs, even a new beach in the South Pacific. And all this has got me thinking what you're probably thinking. I got a lot of questions. And today I wanted to share my 3 questions I have about the new clubs and what this all means up next. Welcome to episode 565 of the Royal Caribbean Blog podcast. If you're listening to this episode when it comes out, thank you so much, but it is late. As you know, the news came out on the day we usually publish our podcast, and then I thought, well, maybe I'll wait in a week, but I really wanted to talk about it now because, like all of you, I saw the news about Perfect Day Mexico, the Royal Beach Club in Cozumel, Nassau, even Lelepa, and I am super excited for this. I mean, this is incredible stuff because we got a shoveling of information. Like usually Royal Caribbean drips out information with new stuff, but here we really have like the most amount of information I can recall in a long time with like, here's everything we're doing in all these places. And it's really impressive. I mean, if you think about where we will be when we get to sometime in 2027, you're going to have, 2 different perfect days. You're going to have 2 different beach clubs. You're even going to have at some point in 2027, a beach option over in Lepa and Vanuatu in the South Pacific. You still have Labadee, we're going to imagine. So there's a lot of things happening. And like, I think many of you listening, I was like ready to go now. I really want to go check it out. But since that's not in the cards yet, we can at least look forward to it. But with all this information, and I love that Royal is giving us all this information and we have all this, and I've been sifting through all of it. There are still some questions that I have about what this means and what we can expect and whatnot. So the big thing with all of this is we got a lot of details about what you can do. Like Royal Caribbean went through every single thing at Perfect Day Mexico, the beach clubs, Lepa, like what it looks like, the different areas, the different vibes, experiences you can expect there. Cool. The thing we didn't get is obviously when we can start booking it, pricing and whatnot. And as you start to wrap your mind around some of these options, I started thinking about some of these questions myself because, I really feel like while you can certainly look at all the information shared, and I'll have a link here in our show notes for you if you haven't seen the article yet. We have all the information, renderings, all that good stuff there. But for the purposes of this podcast, I came up with 3 questions that I had about this new reveal. Now, there's many more than that. And I am sure somebody will post a comment and I'll be like, oh gosh, that was a really good question to ask. But number 1, let's start with Perfect Day Mexico, because this is by far the crown jewel of the release. Like Royal Caribbean lumped this in with all the other stuff, but without a shadow of a doubt, Perfect Day Mexico is getting the lion's share of the attention. And there's so many things here. I mean, the scale of this is really hard to convey. And when I first got wind of this, Royal Caribbean invited me down to Miami to check out some early renderings and to release the plans. And of course, this was before even they announced it to the public. And then since then, even before the event, I got a heads up on what it looks like, and they showed me the renderings and all this stuff. The scale of this project is really difficult to imagine because there isn't really a great comparison. I mean, if you've been to Costa Maya and you know Costa Maya pretty well in today's form, basically they're taking over everything you see. It's kind of like that Lion King quote that Mufasa gives to Simba, everywhere the light shines, that's our territory. Like, I feel like that is exactly, if you're on a cruise ship docked in Costa Maya, that's exactly what it applies to. I mean, they've acquired all the land, not only the pier area. So the port area is most people understand. That's like where all the shops are. That is completely being destroyed, removed, demolished. But they've also acquired, there's a street, a road that goes behind the port. Usually you would go there if you were on a shore excursion and to leave the port area. That's been acquired. There's a fake Mayan ruin behind that. That's been acquired. If you go even further than that, there's a water park that already exists. They're acquiring that. If you look at the beach areas now, where the ships dock to the left and to the right of the pier, they've acquired that land as well. I mean, it's over 200 acres of land. Now, granted, some of that land are mangroves, so they're not developing every single acre of that, and a lot of it's going to be conservation. But it is an absolutely enormous project, which, of course, leads me to my first question, which is how big will Perfect Day Mexico feel? They talked about, as an example, and I wish I had the numbers, but I don't have any numbers to share with you. They were kind of trying to quantify the distance if you were to walk from the pier to the back, which essentially would be the water park. And today at Perfect Day Coco Key, if you were to walk from the pier to the back of the island, so to speak, you'd be walking to basically either Breezy Bay or the Cocoa Beach Club. And that's like a, 5-minute walk. I mean, once you get to the end of the pier, I mean, it's not that long of a walk. But in perfect day Mexico, that's going to be a hike. I mean, you could walk it, I suppose, but I mean, I think it's significantly longer. And to that point, Royal Caribbean is adding, obviously, they'll have tram service. They will have some new boats to kind of mix it up a little bit. And they're really trying to break up the areas, but it's going to be a really, really big field. As an example, classic here, we'll talk about the Lazy River, which is probably the most talked about feature of Perfect Day Mexico because people have been clamoring for a Lazy River for such a long time. This is going to take, they estimate 45 to 60 minutes to do one loop. Now I'm going to assume for the sake of argument that 60-minute window is probably a conservative view and maybe it's closer to, even if it's 30 minutes, that's a really long lazy river. I mean, most lazy rivers are not nearly that long. Most lazy rivers are certainly, you can do a loop in, 20 minutes or something like that. If that, I mean, most of them are not nearly as large. So this is a ginormous water feature and it's going to drive a lot of traffic, not to mention the fact it's complimentary included. So that means there's no cost to it. And I think it's going to be the hot ticket off the bat. I mean, I think everybody's going to want to go check it out because number one, it's included. Number two, some of the other areas are more specialized. Like the water park is going to be an amazing water park. The thing with the water park though, is that it has an extra cost. El Hideaway, extra cost. Costa Beach Club, extra cost. So like, these are all great places, but because they have an extra cost, they're going to reduce the demand for it. Certainly some people are going to want to, I think, gravitate towards the beach. But as somebody who loves the pool over the beach personally, I mean, going to, Splash Cove and where the lazy river is just seems like a natural fit. So, part of it is like, okay, what is it going to look like when they've got a full day there and there are 2 or 3 Royal Caribbean cruise ships docked there? And they're, and you've got Star of the Seas and Icon of the Seas together. I mean, it's a lot of people. And obviously, they'll be dispersed. Not everybody gets off the ship. Some people will go and do other things. So it's not like, 20,000 people are descending upon the lazy river by any means, but it's going to be a hot ticket. And so part of it is, one question, and I don't know we'll ever get the answer until it actually opens, how does it feel to get around there? Because the only thing I was trying to think, like, what does it feel like to traverse that size of land otherwise? And certainly in a tourist perspective, I mean, a theme park, right? If you go to Walt Disney World, does it feel like the Magic Kingdom where I'm going from Main Street USA to Frontierland? Is it not nearly that kind of scale? So that's something to think about. And then, of course, the lazy river itself, what kind of crowds will we expect? As I mentioned, I think it's going to be the hot ticket off the bat. I think on day one, you can expect a lot of lazy river coverage from a lot of people. A lot of people are just going to go there and be like, hey, let's go check out the lazy river first. And like the beach is like, it's funny because it's, Perfect Day Mexico, and beaches are usually what people think about when they talk about a Caribbean cruise and why they'd want to go to wherever. I really think they're going to, like, it's almost secondary in that regard. I could be wrong on that. I don't know, but we'll have to see. So that's kind of like number one. Number two is how much will the beach clubs cost? Royal Caribbean has not released any pricing, and I tried my best, ladies and gentlemen, to squeeze out any information about pricing. I mean, this is what we all want to know is how much it's going to cost. Now remember, there are 2 different beach clubs. One's in the Bahamas and one's in Cozumel. And the one in Nassau will open first. We'll get pricing for that one first. Now, I asked once again, what's the pricing? Still no information about pricing. I don't have any hard data or anything like that. But the best answer I got was essentially it'll be competitively priced with other offers. Moreover, they said the day pass will have multiple price points. And of course, there'll be dynamic pricing, which is like everything that Royal Caribbean sells. Dynamic pricing means, if you're on one ship or one sailing, the price will be different than another ship or another sailing. We know that. But the key words here are competitively priced with other offers. What they mean by that is, what do things cost at other places like Atlantis or the Baja Mar or Margaritaville? So if you go look at those day passes, and you can do that right now and go look at how much they cost, spoiler alert, they're not cheap. That's what Royal is going to price it at. They're not going to come in and say, well, I'm making up numbers now. I have really no idea, but I really don't think we're going to get, $50 passes. Keeping in mind, by the way, that the beach clubs are all inclusive. Now, what's interesting is the day pass has multiple price points, which I was led to believe, and this is not official, so don't take this as the gospel truth. that there may be a option that does not include alcohol, as an example for kids. That might be, it will not include alcohol, but maybe there's an option that does not include drinks with your admission cost. We'll have to see on that. But the competitively pricing is certainly interesting. If you look up the Atlantis Resort, if you look up Margaritaville, Baja Mar, those are the three that really stick out, especially Atlantis. You're not getting into those places less than $200 a person, which is why I think that Royal, especially considering it's including alcohol with it, is almost certainly going to have to approach that number, if not exceed it. That's my guess. In addition to that, the other question is, what about things that we as Royal Caribbean cruisers may be accustomed to? Like, if you have a drink package on board, if you're a Diamond member and have Diamond drinks, will any of those be honored? If I had to guess, and nobody told me anything, this is just Matt guessing now, I would say no. I think those things are like, that's nice you have them, but they don't apply. Because you have to think of this as more of, the beach clubs are more like shore excursions than they are Perfect Day at Coco Key. At Perfect Day, this is an extension of your cruise experience, right? Your drink package, your Wi-Fi, that all works over here. I don't think we'll see the same thing with when you go over to the beach clubs. Again, I could be wrong on that, but we'll see. Ultimately, the pricing is going to be, for a lot of people, the decision whether or not they go. I mean, you could sit here and wax poetically about all the amazing things you can do and why you'd want to go to all these places and how amazing they are, but, it depends on how much it's going to cost. And I think I've shared this analogy either here on the podcast or maybe somewhere else in Royal Caribbean blog land. I do believe it's going to be, it reminds me a lot, or the thought process anyway, of like how I approach the Coco Beach Club at Perfect Day Coco Key, because the beach club these days is easily somewhere between $150 and $250 a person. And so when I go to Perfect Day, when I have a cruise that goes there, I don't necessarily automatically book it. In fact, I rarely book it these days. But if I can get a good price, if there's a Black Friday sale, if there is a good deal on a cabana, then sure, I'll indulge and maybe I'll book that. And I think the beach clubs may be to that point. Certainly, if you're new to the Bahamas and you've never been there before and you've heard the stories about it, this may lead you to it. There's a lot of people who, quite frankly, are looking for a easy button for planning. And I think that's going to attract a lot of people, whether they're new cruisers, whether they've been there, done that, that's a different story. But I do think they're not going to have any problem selling it out. I mean, I think if we've learned one thing about all these projects, beach clubs, Perfect Day, Lelepa, this is all based on what their customers are telling them. Royal Caribbean was very adamant about the fact that they're not just picking these ideas out of the sky and be like, well, I think maybe this would be a good idea. Everything they're doing, almost everything they're doing, is based on guest feedback. They actually bring in cruisers under NDA to evaluate ideas. So what do you think of this? What do you think of that? What are you looking for? What would you like to see in these kind of things? And they base so much of this on guest feedback. Now, obviously, one person's feedback is different than another person's feedback. And I'm sure there's somebody sitting here listening to this episode saying, well, I don't particularly need or care about X, Y, or Z features. That's fair. But overall, in a grouping of opinions, I think there's absolutely rationale as to why they went with one direction or another. So you've got that focus, if you will, as it comes to why they went in a certain direction, why they're offering certain things, and you kind of get that. So, I think they're going to do well with it. I don't think you're going to sit here and have to worry too much about them not selling the beach clubs, but the cost is not going to be cheap. And really the question is, are we talking $250 a person, $300 a person? And how that looks and, how that factors into it. I mean, it's too early for me to speculate. I don't want to speculate on speculation. Like, how much will it cost? And then will I be willing to pay for it? I mean, it depends on a couple different things. And, I will say that at this point, when I visit Nassau, and I'm trying to think of the last, 6 to whatever times I've visited Nassau, probably on Utopia of the Seas, I think I've gotten off the ship like once. And what Royal told me was that I think the number they shared was like 20% of guests don't get off the ship at all. But a lot of people that number said, well, Matt, that number seems really low, except that a lot of people that do get off the ship for very short amounts of time. So getting off the ship checks the box, but that doesn't mean they're there for 8 hours. They may get off the ship for an hour or 30 minutes or 2 hours, then get back on board. So that's why, you get that sense of, oh, not a lot of people are off the ship, because they were, but they got off quickly and came back on board. Anyway, I think there's going to change that thought process of, okay, well, maybe now there's something more interesting, more intriguing to try out, and I like to mix it up as much as anybody. So when you're talking about these beach clubs, I think it's having that choice there is fantastic. It's interesting when they announced Perfect Day Mexico. A lot of listeners here ask me, Matt, you love Maya Chan and Costa Maya. Does this mean you're never going to go there again? I'm like, no, I would love to go there. Like, I've been to Perfect Day Coco Key 50 times now. I'm estimating. If there was an option to do something else, I'd probably do something else at this point just to mix it up. So no, I was still gladly indulge in other things. But for the beach clubs, it's going to be an interesting price. Now, the Cozumel one, again, that's a great question. So generally speaking, let's take the beach clubs out of this. In the Cozumel versus Nassau, the price of a day pass to a resort in the Bahamas versus Cozumel is significantly different. In Cozumel, you can get all inclusive for around, I'm going to say $60 to $70 a person. Whereas, we just talked about the prices in the Bahamas. It's vastly different. So I'm curious if the Royal product will also be vastly different in price. We'll have to see on that one. The third question, and it's kind of left out here because it's not only not in North America, but also the least baked idea so far, if you will. And that is, what should we expect with Lelepa? So Lelepa is interesting. When I first was brought in by Royal Caribbean to take a look at some of these plans, it was going to be a beach club. If you remember, years ago, it was going to be Perfect Day at Lelepa, and then it became a beach club. And then literally they changed it in the last week before the formal announcement. It's just Lelepa, in the same way that Labadee is Labadee. It's not Perfect Day. It's not a beach club. It's just it's a destination. So, and the reason why they're doing that, by the way, is because it's about expectations. If you call it Perfect Day, if you call it a beach club, there are going to be certain expectations. And so they didn't want to have that because they knew that because it's so remote and so different, they just couldn't deliver on that same level. So they wanted to make sure that, they're not overhyping, overstimulating. And if it's really just kind of your chill out day, that's what Lepa is all about. So the real question for me is, what is it really going to be like? Because obviously they admitted that they're still working on a lot of ideas here. I mean, they have a general, consensus of the direction they're going, and you're not going to find a water park there. You're not going to find a flow rider. You're not going to find thrill at all. This is purely chill. That is 100% set. So the question is, to what extent will it be 100% chill, right? In what capacity? Lepa is an interesting one because it's such a departure, both physically and metaphysically, about how they're approaching these projects. And, for the Australian cruise market, which is definitely a growing cruise market, this is a huge, I think, boon for them to have something different to do there. I was having a conversation online with one of our readers who lives in Australia. And he was, I think he would agree that he was complaining that, about Lelepa. And the thing I was trying to convey, I don't think I did a good job of it, was that, today Lelepa is different than what's going to be there. And with Royal Caribbean, they have a vision, I think, for what they're looking to do. And in this case, it's really just providing the ultimate beach day. In this case, the ultimate beach relaxing day, right? And I think that's what they're going to go with it. It remains to be seen exactly how it's going to work, but I don't think it's fair to say that it'll be anything like what it is today. I think what they're going to look at it as, this is going to be their version of that walled garden that's going to offer something more to check out. We'll have to see on that. I've been wrong about many predictions in the past, but I am curious how that one's going to look as we get into early 2027 when Lepa is scheduled to open, and how people will, treat that one. It's not a dock, by the way. That's the other reason it's not a Perfect Day. They can't dock the ships there because of the shoreline situation. So you'll have to tender there. That's another situation at all. Some people might say, well, Matt, it looks absolutely beautiful, but, tendering is tendering. And I get where they're coming from on that one. But ultimately, having previewed these events and then been there in New York when they released all this information, it looks incredible. And I love the dreaming aspect, the scale of these projects, because this really is taking Royal Caribbean into a new era, if you will, because I feel like these new projects introduce so many new choices in how we look at a Caribbean cruise. Man, Lepa's not in Caribbean. Go with me on this one. Like, the way that we look at these cruise options, it really, I think, will fundamentally change a lot of things. For us as Royal Caribbean fans, we get more choice in what we can do in each of these ports, especially some of these ports where it's definitely been there, done that. Or if you're new to Royal Caribbean, having that choice of this is the easy button. You don't have to think twice about it. Super simple and fantastic. For other cruise lines, my goodness, they've been playing catch up with Perfect Day at Coco Key for years, right? Celebration Key by Carnival is clearly a let's copy Perfect Day. But now, not only are they still behind the eight ball on that, they're now behind like three more because they're now, their products don't compare to what Royal has just announced there. So anyway, it's going to be interesting. And I think it's a great time for us as cruisers. Choice is always good. Having variety of it is there. And I'm excited for these new places to open up. All right, friends, time to answer listener emails. This is part of the episode where I answer the emails you've sent me. You can always email me your questions by sending them to Matt@RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, Matt@RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com. First email is from Kimberly. Hey, Matt, love listening to your YouTube Q&A on Monday nights and to your podcast. Your advice helped us so much. My husband and I are cruising in January on Grandeur out of Tampa. We were wondering the best place to stay the night before, where to catch dinner at a reasonable price, and the best way to get to the cruise terminal. Also, this will be our first time on a much smaller ship and an inside cabin. We've previously been on Oasis class ships. Any tips on excursions in Belize and any can't miss experience on Grandeur? Thanks again for all you do. Hoping to meet you someday for a group cruise. Thank you for the email, and this is a loaded question. We'll probably do this entire episode on Tampa. But there are a number of great hotels. When I go to a city that I'm not familiar with, like Tampa in this case, oftentimes what I'll do, my strategy is simply, sort hotels by 4 stars or higher, and kind of go from there, figuring that it's probably difficult to have a bad time at one of these hotels. A couple of hotels that usually stand out is the Tampa Marriott Water Street. That one's actually convenient. It's located near the port, and it usually does pretty darn well. There's also a Hampton Inn and Suites in Tampa, Ybor City. Ybor is spelled Y-B-O-R. If you're not familiar with the area, there's no way you'd be able to guess how to spell that name. But it's also a convenient hotel for you. But generally speaking, I feel like, number one, when you're picking a hotel, you're going to have to take a taxi or some sort of service to get there. So I feel like it doesn't really behoove you that much to pick something that's super close to the port, but it is nice. And there's a lot more things happening in the downtown area. I'd either stay in downtown Tampa or right by the Tampa airport. Depends on your preference. Ybor City is kind of a hot spot within Tampa. There's a lot of restaurants and it's easy to walk around, which is why a lot of people end up staying in that particular area. But that might be a good spot for you. Now, as for going on a smaller ship like Grandeur and seeing an inside cabin, I recently went on an Enchantment of the Seas for the very first time, and I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. Now, part of that is about expectations, having the right expectations, lining them, right? I'm not sure which ships you're used to, but I'm assuming you're used to much bigger ships. So obviously having the right expectations in terms of what the ship offers and what it doesn't offer, and also embracing, nice thing about inside cab, number one, you're going to save money. Number two, embrace what's happening around the ship. Get up in the morning, get out there, hang out at the pool, hang out at the hot tub, solarium, take advantage of what the ship has to offer, and maximize your time out of the cabin so you're not as cabin dependent, if you will. As for Belize, I'm not so sure. I don't have any go-to tours. I've been to Belize 2 or 3 times, and it's been a number of years since I did my last tour over there. I would tell you this about Belize. It's definitely one of those ports you should absolutely have a plan in place. It is not a walk around and explore kind of port. So have a short excursion in mind and make sure it's quite clear about, getting there and getting back and all that. Because there's a long ferry ride involved in Belize. It's a tender port. So as I recall, I don't think it's 30 minutes, but it's a pretty long tender ride. So there's a bit of a commute involved with that. Thanks, Kimberly, for the email. Our next email is coming to us from Chris from Boise, Idaho. Good day, Matt. Thanks for all the great advice. You helped my family create countless happy memories over the past few years. On that note, we've got our first stop at St. Croix coming up, and I'm finding very little information on things to do in the port. Is there anything you would recommend? Thanks for the email, Chris. St. Croix is another one of those ports that's really tough to plan around because there's not an obvious thing to do there. St. Croix is part of the U.S. Virgin Islands, and unfortunately, I hate to say it this way, it's probably the least attractive Virgin Island, the least interesting. It's very small and there's not a lot going on. I do recall once upon a time we went to the Sandcastle Resort. They offer day passes here. Now here's the catch. You can't book it in advance. They offer day passes, but only on the day of, and you got to really roll in there. So you're putting all your eggs in one basket that you're basically going to, take a taxi over there and they're going to have a spot for you. More than likely they will, but on our last visit, when we went to St. Croix, we thought about going there and ended up not doing that. Now, instead, we just walked around downtown, and it was okay. There's a little bit of shopping, some cute restaurants, but it wasn't enough to hold our attention for the entire day. Truthfully, there's two ways to look at it. One is, if you're going to go to St. Croix, I would either go to like the Sandcastle Resort. You can Google it, by the way. It's not through Royal Caribbean, just, the resort, and get the address for it, and then take a taxi over there. Or some other beach day activity. There are other beaches, and maybe even all-inclusive or a day pass you can get. Otherwise, you might think about it, well, don't forget, if you're going to St. Croix, you're probably also going to a number of other islands in the area, right? I'm assuming you're on some kind of a Southern Caribbean itinerary. You might make the argument, well, if you're going to, I'm making up, St. Thomas, and you're going to St. Martin, do you really need another beach day? Maybe that is what you do, because that's what I did. Get off the ship, walk around, have breakfast, grab a drink in the port, do a little bit of shopping, and then head back to the ship. That's also another option. But I don't have a ton of recommendations because it's a very small port. The good thing is you can easily walk from the ship into the downtown area. It's very inviting. Unlike what we were just talking about in Belize, this actually is a very nice place to walk around, but it's limited. It's not like Charlotte Amalie and St. Thomas or San Juan in Puerto Rico that have expansive downtown regions that could really, you can spend a lot of time shopping. It's more of like a one street, couple of different shops kind of situation there. It's nice, it's beautiful, and there's actually a really nice park we sat at and enjoyed the view, but it's limited in that regard. So I don't want to make it seem like it's an all-day kind of affair. So there you go. Next question is from Lynn. Hey, Matt. Just curious if you know when Royal Caribbean will be releasing 2027 Mediterranean itineraries. Wife and I are starting planning out our 10th anniversary trip and want to make it a big one. Just recently got hooked on cruising and went on my first in December last year and have 2 cruises booked on winter this year. Thanks for all your help along the way. Lynn, great question. So as it relates to the Mediterranean, the basic premise is Royal Caribbean usually releases new cruises every year around the same time. Now, I'm going to tell you the time, but keep in mind they could change it, although they haven't changed it in forever. Number one, they usually put out new European itineraries in the fall, November, December timeframe. It's almost always like Alaska first, and like Europe second, and then 7-night Caribbean itineraries, and maybe that flip-flops somewhere in between. So probably it will come out in the fall of this year. The Royal Caribbean puts out its new itineraries in the fall. Like some of them come out in the fall and the rest come out in the spring. So it's either between end of October through early December, or it'll be in the spring, February through April-ish, and that not. So I think reasonably speaking, it's a good expectation that you'll probably get it in the fall of this year, but keeping in mind that could change. So there you go. And our final email today is going to be coming to us from Christopher from Singapore. Hey, Matt, I'm a big fan of your podcast and appreciate your insights to share about Royal Caribbean. I booked 2 upcoming cruises on Navigator, one in November 26th and the other in March of 27. At the time of booking, the onboard credits were $200 and $150 respectively. Recently, I noticed that Royal Caribbean increased the onboard credit for these sailings to $525 and $475 respectively. However, the cruise fares have also gone up. When I inquired, I was told the higher onboard credit offsets the higher cruise fare, so the overall value remains the same. My concern is, as an early booker, I've secured a lower fare, but I'm now receiving fewer perks compared to those booking later. This seems to contradict the idea that booking early provides the best value. I'm curious about your thoughts on this practice. Is it common for cruise lines to structure promotions this way? Should early bookers expect to miss out on enhanced perks offered later? Thanks for considering your topic on the listener email segment. Chris, really interesting email. So there's a couple things to keep in mind, and I think you kind of answered your own question, in my opinion, when you mentioned the fact that you booked it at a lower price. If you're getting more onboard credit, but you're paying a higher cruise fare, that's not really a deal for you, Chris. You got a better deal. Ultimately, when it comes to, would you rather get onboard credit or a lower price? I think lower price is what most people would pick, and I would too. At the end of the day, I want the lowest possible cruise fare, and the benefits of the onboard credits that's out there are secondary. Now, you live in Singapore, and I'm not familiar with the promotion rules for your country. As an example, when I'll say this, here in the U.S., Chris, if you were to book your cruise as early as you could, which you did, right, Navigator of the Seas, and you got whatever you got, if there was a better deal overall, your travel agent could rebook you at the new prevailing rates and promotions and still take advantage of that up until final payment date. Now, I'm not sure what the rules are for Singapore. I know some countries you're not allowed to do this. The UK is one of them, but I'm not familiar with Singapore. So to answer your question, at least here in the US or in Canada, this would not be a problem. Like, you'd be able to still take advantage of it, and it still does provide the best value. I think ultimately overall, though, even let's assume for a second you can't take advantage of repricing. You're still getting the best price overall. Royal Caribbean does play a game with its cruise fares. As you noted, they're increasing the price of the cruise. They're offering more onboard credit. It's all a game of marketing to attract people. Like, to say, like, okay, either some people might see the lower price, the cruise fare, and be like, wow, I want to book it for that. Other people might see the higher onboard credit and be like, wow, that's something really cool right there, right? So it's like different rationales, different impetuses for booking a cruise. And that's really what it is. But to answer your question more specifically, should early bookers have to miss out on enhanced perks offered later? Generally not, because usually, even if there are better perks, like onboard credit in this case, the fare is almost certainly higher than it was when you booked it. Classic example of this, there is a cruise on Star of the Seas that my travel agent recently, I forget what happened, repriced or made final payment. I think it was final payment. And the difference in cruise fare was a magnitude of thousands of dollars difference, as I booked it on day one versus had I waited until, just then to book it. I still believe you are getting the best possible deal of booking early. Now, it definitely helps if you live in a country where you can reprice cruises. And again, I'm not familiar with the rules in Singapore, but even without that, I still think you're better off 9 out of 10 times booking early, because you're playing a game waiting. Not to mention the fact that, Chris, if you had waited and maybe took advantage of that onboard credit, would you have gotten the cabin category you wanted? Would you have gotten the cabin location you wanted? Maybe not. I mean, you are talking about cruises coming up in, well over a year from now, but still, that's also another consideration you should think about. So, good question. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chris, for the email. Thank you, everybody, for checking out this episode of the Royal Caribbean Blog Podcast. Of course, you can always email me your questions by emailing them to matt@royalcaribbeanblog.com, Matt, M-A-T-T, @royalcaribbeanblog.com. Until next time, I'm Matt. We'll talk again real soon.